let's let's start seated. So nice comfy seat. Gonna have a blanket and a wall handy for the practice today. We'll settle in. A nice tall spine, easy fluid breath. Maybe let the eyes close here. There's this little village that surrounds this well. That's a well, like a Lawrence of Arabia well, not like an English countryside well. And the village, it holds about as much importance as the wells in Lawrence of Arabia. Think about those tweaks and adjustments that you can bring into the verticality of your seat. And as you get more and more vertical, as the spinal column itself stacks, think about how you can relax the musculature so that you are more at ease. Maybe as you're seated here, a little reminder that no matter what anyone wants to tell us, the practice of yoga came to be so that we could sit comfortably. And that is its entire goal, at least the physical practice of yoga, movement, fitness, so that we can sit here peacefully and in stillness. Let's give ourselves 30 more seconds just to kind of feel into that ability to be at ease here. We'll let the eyes softly open if they're closed. And let's extend our legs out in front of us if they're not already extended, so that we end up in a staff. And maybe just to feel how the posterior chain is set up to begin practice, let's take ourselves into a little forward fold. Maybe note where the restrictions are most impactful. Give yourself enough time and enough ease and fluidity within your breath. You can really feel the restrictiveness of the posterior chain. Where are the challenges here? And then once you feel like you have an idea of where you're feeling the most restrictive, let's come back up into staff. And from staff, we'll bend the left knee. And we're just going to clasp that nice and tight here. So bringing a little bit of engagement across that anterior tibialis musculature Really thinking about forearm to musculature and pulling not just back towards the body, but in towards the medial line so that that left forearm is really pressing us and compressing us in, accessing that anterior hip flexor and hip crease musculature. And then switch the strength of the pressure here from the left forearm to the right hand. So we want that left forearm to kind of bring in the middle of this tibia bone. And then we're just going to hold that with the right hand, and the left hand's going to come behind us. And really think about elongating the spine. It's easy to think about just twisting. Think about getting tall in the spine. Try to feel the space, almost like the discs between the vertebrae can breathe here. So we take pressure off them into the rotation. And then we'll relax back to neutral. You can release the leg grip, let that extend back in front of you, and find your way back into a fold. See if you can feel the impact that just a single rotation, an intentional rotation, has made on our ability to be at ease here. Give ourselves just 15 more seconds. We'll bring ourselves back up into a vertical spine, staff position. Bring that right leg in, heel comes in. The right forearm starts the pressure. It just helps to really get the entirety of the leg structure to compress both back and in towards the medial line. Once you feel like you have that position, then the left hand just takes the position of holding, and then the right hand comes behind us, and we elongate the spine into the twist. Really thinking about how we space out the spinal column to receive here. And then we will, when you feel balance left to right, come back to neutral. Extend that leg, that right leg, and follow it forward into another forward fold. Really trying to feel the impact we've made from those rotations. We'll give ourselves just 15 more seconds here. When it feels appropriate, we'll bring ourselves back up into a nice vertical spine. Let's grab our blanket. And with our blanket, depending on how rigid the thoracic spine's feeling. So if you know your thoracic spine just always fights against you, let's go with a half fold hot dog. If you know that you can get a little bit more mobility out of the thoracic spine, then let's use a roll. So we're either using that shelf fold hot dog, so a shelf fold the hot dog, or just a roll, and that's going to come behind us. our first placement here is essentially across the shoulder girdle. So as high up as we can get into the shoulder blade, into the scapula. And we're just going to bring our body down and let the head and arms extend over top. This will be about as active as we get here, but we are going to kind of move around a little bit. Lift the, or bring the knees into a bent position if they're not already. So bottoms of the feet are firmly connected to the mat. And let's just lift the tailbone up until you feel like you've created a neutral plane, and then release. And as you release, see if you can relax the arms, the head, the neck into more space above you, into the space behind you, not towards the ceiling. And then one more time, let's lift ourselves up, trying to create relative neutrality across the torso, and then release the tailbone down. And try to find any last space there. And then let's just wiggle ourselves up so that the prop comes a little bit more to the bottom side of the scapula, maybe even just off the scapula. And we'll do the same thing. We'll bring ourselves up into a nice, relatively neutral position. And then drop down. And let's come up to neutral. And then drop down. Just breathe and relax here. If the overhead position isn't feeling good for the shoulders, you can bend the elbows. Let the shoulders relax a little bit more. If the extension works, stay with that extension. And then let's wiggle ourselves up just a little bit more. So now we're kind of at that thoracic joint, or roughly at the thoracic joint, the union between the lumbar and thoracic. Then bring our tailbone up into neutral. And then release down. Bring our tailbone up into neutral. And then release down, thinking about any available length in the torso that we can find. And then once you find it, relax. We'll just be at ease in the breath here. We'll give ourselves just 15 more seconds here. And let's slowly lift our hips and just use that to walk ourselves to the point where we can grab that prop and pull it out. And we'll set that to the side. And let the tailbone come back down to the mat. And as you settle back in here, think about how different the spine feels in this neutrality. how that upper half of the torso, how the thoracic spine, responds to being in this neutral position. And then let's continue that space. We're just going to roll to one side or the other. And we're headed to our wall. Really going to play on crafting space in the spine. So legs up against the wall, kick them up, just a traditional supported, wall supported inversion here. Arms ideally are going to be by our side palms up or at cactus or T. And the goal here is to take that space that we've crafted across the torso and just let it melt in. Remember, if the posterior chain is fighting against this shape, right? If the hamstrings are the restriction here, just bend the knees. Try to take the hamstrings out of this shape so that the receiving end of this shape is our tailbone tucked into the corner and the neutrality, almost a hyper neutrality, right? If ever there was an oxymoron, hyper neutrality is it. But really, this wonderful neutrality that our spine is in. And so while this well is an integral part of life in this little village, like many things, it becomes granted, as if it will always be there. One day, this farmer is lowering the bucket down into the well. And he hears this unmistakable whisper rise up from the bottom. And the whisper clearly states to him, "Beware of the storm from the east." And he calls down into the well, expecting there to be someone down there, and no one responds. He goes back to the farm and he looks east and he sees this huge brewing storm. And so he takes the advice of this well, this whisper from this well, and he boards up all of his animals and he locks everything down, gets everything secure. And sure enough, the storm whips through and it is powerful and it wreaks havoc on the farmers around him. But he had heeded the advice and prepared, and the well guided him. And when it feels appropriate, let's try to take a little tension out of the posterior chain. We are going to bend the right knee so that the bottom of the right foot can rest against the wall. Now, if you have both knees bent, see if you can bend that right knee a little bit more. And if that's not impacting you, it's not making a change, just stay exactly as you are. You already have the ideal space. We have the opportunity to play with some different things here. And so we have this hyper neutrality, right? And then we have the tibia and fibia running parallel with the torso. We have the femur running at, roughly 40, 45-ish angle into the hip socket. And so the more we compress into that anterior hip crease, and the more neutral our foot is against the wall, the more we can impact the proximal head of the femur in the hip socket to get deeper and deeper approximation of that joint. It's really it's really nice because we have full articulation and integrity of the ankle. We have this really nice angle on the tibia and fibia, and we're not weight bearing on the hip. So the way in which we're impacting the hip joint is pretty unique in this shape. The key is we really want to be, even through the impact we're making, nice and relaxed. The more we can relax, the more space we can create in our spine, and the deeper we can adjust this hip socket. And when you're ready, we'll extend our right leg back up the wall. Make sure that the sacrum is balanced. And then let's do the same thing to the second side. So left knee bends. And we want that bottom of the left foot as flat against the wall as is possible. Tibia and fibia as parallel with the torso as possible. This nice deep angle for our femur. And we'll just get that into a place where everything feels integrated. And then we'll just start to relax. So the farmer tells his fellow villagers about this warning he got from the well. And they, of course, approach the warning with skepticism. A well speaking isn't something that is easy to believe. But people start going to the well and spending more and more time listening. And sure enough, they start receiving advice. And just as the advice was impactful for the farmer, the advice is continually valid, impactful, and helpful. And so a great deal of excitement spreads throughout the village that they have this well that not only can talk, but can help them make better choices. When you feel balance left to right, we'll extend that left leg and resettle back into the neutrality of the wall. Really getting our body to relax. Thinking about how the tailbone tucks into the corner and how the spine extends away from that tailbone space. Let's give ourselves just 30 more seconds here. And then we'll bend the knees and just slowly work our way off the wall. Now we'll return to a seat for a moment. So just getting your spine vertical, letting your body soften. Think about the blood rebalancing as we get out of the inversion. And let's grab our blanket or towel. And we'll get that to towel length. So if you are using a blanket from shelf fold, one unfold. If you're at towel, then just a towel length. And we'll roll that. So we end up with a nice long roll that can come over the ankles, tuck around, and let the knees fall out wide as we lower ourselves onto our spine with this little supported supine butterfly, Adho Sukhanasana. We find our way back into our breath. It's easy and fluid. We want to feel that support on the lateral edges of the shins, the ankles, so that this medial opening feels completely supported. One day, this young woman goes down to the well And she drops the bucket in, listening for advice, as is the common practice now. And the well whispers to her, "Your neighbor is envious of you." And it kind of rattles her because she had expected advice. She goes back and she tells her family, and they kind of brush her off. She probably misheard the well or something. Thinking about that neutrality in your spine so that the lumbar is not arching here, although it naturally wants to, but we're staying neutral. The next day, this young woman's mother goes down to the well and she drops the bucket in. And the well whispers back to her, "The vendor at the market is scamming you, overcharging you for your produce." And she pulls the bucket up and she takes the water, but it feels tainted. Check in with your rate of respiration and see if there is still room to slow it down. Can we be more at ease in our breath? We'll give ourselves 30 more seconds here. And when it feels appropriate, let's bring our knees back to neutral. And we'll pull the thighs close enough that we can grab that prop. And with the prop, we want something roughly block-esque. So folding in a way where you get a roughly block-like shape. Let's place that between the knees and let the knees fall over to the left. And so think about stacking the hips here. So taking that lower hip and really tucking it underneath you so that you have the ability for that right hip to come on top in a nice little stack. And think about the length in the spine, how we can accentuate and expand into the twist, the length of the spine. I'll just breathe into this. Relaxing into the twist, but being less concerned about the rotation and more the space in between the vertebrae as we work our way up. And so the whispers from the well become more and more specific. This person overcharged you. This person took your tool. And the people become more and more fearful of the well and its whispers. Become more and more distrustful of the people within their community. And they begin bypassing the well, walking out into the desert for this little natural spring to gather their water. That walk is long. And carrying the water that distance has a toll. And so the people start to use less and less water. Thinking about relaxing so that the hips almost melt down towards the bottom of your mat. And your breath draws you up into the expansion of the spine. Slowing down your breath. And so as the people walked past the well would whisper out to them. I'm here. And you're thirsty, it would call as they walked by. The people of this village became more and more weary of the well as the days passed. They used the well less and less. Last 30 seconds here. Let's bring our knees back to neutral. And then we'll let the knees fall over to that second side. Letting that bottom hip tuck underneath so that we can stack. And being at ease so that your spine can elongate. Over the years, the well in the center of town started to wither away, started to dry up. And yet still, as the villagers walked by it, it would call out, I'm here. Aren't you thirsty? And they would walk out into the desert for miles to find this little spring. They could draw water and carry it back. Consuming less and less water because the spring itself was drying up from overuse. It was never really enough to sustain the whole population. Remember how your breath can impact the shape. How as you relax, the hips almost melt down towards the bottom of your mat, and your inhale breath expands the torso up. The spinal column elongates. Eventually, the spring dries up to the point where it's not useful. The villagers go back to their well in the center of town. And they drop a bucket in, but it's completely dry. And a whisper from the bottom of the well creeps up and it says, Are you thirsty? The only other spring is miles and miles out into the desert. Well, some people make that trek. The fabric of the village really dissolves upon itself. Most people leave town. Checking on the rate of respiration to see if there's any opportunity to slow it down. And more ease. Uh, 60 seconds here on the second side. Relaxing into this last cycle or two of breath so that you're completely released into the full potential of this twist. And then we'll bring our knees back to neutral. And we can take that blanket out, set it to the side, and just let the knees do a little dynamic exploration of rotation here. Seeing if there is any last bit of movement that could impact us. And then eventually just bringing your knees back to neutral. And asking yourself if there might be anything you could offer that would benefit you prior to Shavasana. If there is, let's offer that to ourselves now. If we have everything that we need, if we're ready for some stillness, let's drop our way into that stillness now. finding our way into a shape where we can be completely at ease. Years later, one of the very few remaining villagers, now old and frail, dehydrated, approached the dry well. He kneeled down beside it. He leaned closer and he just listened as a whisper arose from the bottom. Full ease in each breath. The whisper that rises from the dry well was you chose to be blind. And in your blindness, you thirst. And in that moment, this elder in its frail state realized the truth. But the well was always being honest. Its whispers had never been curses or burdens. It whispered about reality. And tears started to fall from this elder's eyes as they whispered back, "We should have listened." At the bottom of the well, the faintest trickle of water began to emerge. We'll start to move our fingers and our toes. Our wrists and our ankles. Our elbows and our knees. Shoulders and hips and the entirety of the spine up into the cervical spine, head, jaw, eyes, tongue. Eventually, we'll utilize this movement to transition from the shapes we are in back into a seat. Get the spine tall, let the breath get calm and fluid, and let the eyes close. Think about what you can do to align and elongate the spine. And we'll bring your hands together, heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, can you remind yourself that truth nourishes, but only those who are bold enough to enjoy the taste will receive the nourishment. See how that impacts your experience. Thank you so much for being a part of this morning's practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy Sunday, guys. Appreciate the heck out of you being here. Take care of your spine today. I will be back tomorrow to move. I hope I see you then. If not, I hope I see you next week. Have a beautiful day or week. Love the heck out of you. Mwah. Bye.